Right, we're recording. Okay, great. So this is SIG-cluster-lifecycle on Tuesday, the 4th of April. And let's take a look at what's in the agenda. Okay, first item is cleanup from 1.6. Does anyone want to take that?
So I added that there. I just want to collect the stuff that we need to do and maybe get some names on it. I do think that the first two items I put there is the, docs on networking. We haven't updated the networking docs to call out which solutions and which providers are ready for 1.6 versus not. So my guess is that users are going to have a rough time once they start using 1.6.1. So probably getting that done in the next couple of days should be high priority. I'm going to have a hard time doing that without testing some of this stuff out. So it's going to probably take a while to be able to test it out and make sure that the instructions make sense. It'll probably be a little bit of putting providers in a penalty box until the instructions are clear. And then we can sort of move them up into a list that says, yes, these are ready for 1.6. And so it'll be a little bit of hand wringing, I'm sure, to get this stuff done. But I think in the interest of servicing users, having some clear guidance there will help. And then, so one of the things during our whole exciting drama around 1.6.0 and the breakage there was folks were trying to just launch the 1.5 version of kubeadmin. And the fact that when we pushed the new debs and RPMs, the old ones got deleted, created a whole bunch of issues for folks. The state that we're in now, and I don't see mic on, but the state that we're in now is that we have old versions for the kubelet and kube control. And you can pin to those if you want to, at least on the deb side. I haven't checked the RPM side. But the way the versioning was done for kubeadmin for the last release, it was marked as 1.60-alpha, and the way that these things got sorted meant that actually came before 1.6.0. And so there was no way to keep both the old versions and the new versions in the repo at the same time. Mike just hopped on. So documenting where you can go and download those debs directly, and sort of like the fact that moving forward we're going to have the old versions around, I think will be useful. So just sticking that someplace.
Yeah, now it's actually possible because we've removed the 1.6.0. So 1.6.0 should have higher priority than 1.6. 1.6.1 should have higher priority than 1.6.0 alpha.
Right, but even if we put that deb back, it'll confuse.
Yeah, I don't think we should. It's like with all the known security flaws.
Yeah.
So I think we should try to, since it's alpha, try to move everyone on 1.6 and fix there are 2, 3, 4 issues on the 1.6 branch still. Not so severe ones as the deadlock we saw with CNI taint on nodes not ready. But still there are some that we should merge in time for 1.6.2 or something.
Somebody's typing really loud. Who's typing?
Oh. Ilya, I think.
Ilya, and you're logged in as cluster ops also. I'm surprised it lets you do that.
Yeah, I didn't know it would let me do that, but.
Okay, so I'm sorry, Lucas. Can you repeat that? What is the issue that we got going on there? So is this the reset issue?
Yeah, we have 2 reset issues. One is that it won't reset for you if the Docker service is disabled, and this is really crappy. In general, the code in reset should be improved for 1.7. Basically, we need now when we have CRI by default, we should be able to tell CRI to clean up everything on this node. We should have a such gRPC call or something, because we're still it assumes root access to the CRI socket. So I think we should be fine with the permissions there. when we run kubeadm through. But still, there should be some way to clean up what we've like initialized on our nodes.
All right, well, it seems like something that we should probably take up on an issue. I'm a little bit scary of telling the runtime to actually just sort of nuke everything. I mean, there will be times when folks are running stuff outside of Kubernetes using Docker or the whatever CRI directly. So that, you know, and there may be situations in the future, and I don't know how supported this is, but I can imagine a world where you could have a kubelet joined to multiple masters at some point. Something to think about.
Yeah,
I don't think anybody's talked about that, but I think I'm just scared of like we're having multiple kubelets. It seems scary to me to just have it go and nuke everything at the runtime. It seems like one relationship that isn't necessary.
Yeah, but at least we should try to get rid of the Docker specific things we have. It's just a bunch of workarounds to make it easy for users to clean up everything.
Yeah, that sounds reasonable. Okay, so I'll dig up the issues for the documentation things and put those in there. I could use some help on the docs. Otherwise, I'll try and get to it this week. I'm digging out from post-KubeCon, but it's definitely on my list to do those documents. And then, you know, folks, you know, I don't, Luke, if you could make sure that you know, we have the right pointer to point folks to for Weave. I haven't looked at it lately. That would be useful. Somebody from Weave could do that.
Yeah, sure. The link that's linked to from the add-ons page in the docs
is up to date now.
Is correct. That URL is staying the same, and it now includes new instructions on a URL to use for 1.6.
Sweet. Okay, so I'll go through and look at the rest of them, and I'll have to do a little bit of a test pass there to make sure that we're within spitting distance.
Cool.
Okay. Any other, besides the reset, the networking, the old devs and RPMs, are there any other sort of like cleanup 1.6 type stuff that we got to do?
Yeah, I think we broke self-hosting with removing the test deployment and waiting. At least on master, we broke self-hosting. I'm not sure if we did that on release 1.6, but I'm going to check.
We did it really well anyway, right?
Yeah, exactly. But still, I'm going to check if it affected release 1.6. Basically, since we removed the safety checks before, I think we might hit some race conditions, but well, I'll see. That may be unstable. At least it's broken on master, but I think there's a PR up for fixing that already.
So are those race conditions self-hosting specific, or are they race conditions that could hit us anywhere?
They're self-hosting specific, and I think they're only master. And I didn't see a fix go out, but can you see me on it?
Yeah, I will.
Okay.
So basically, since we're not waiting for things to come up properly, it may be some cases where it doesn't come up cleanly, and kubeadm tries to go on too fast, and then we hit some deadlock of some kind. So yeah, I think the link got pasted in the chat.
Yeah, I'll put that on the notes.
So, and then basically we should try to move on from component statuses, because I think that's kind of faulty. I'm not 100% sure, but I think the original reason was that we hit some race conditions due to that component statuses weren't that reliable in these. But well, I'm not 100% sure. We might 4.1.7 be able to use the health endpoint instead, or checking.
Okay, do you think that that's a necessary thing for 1.6, for the 1.6 cycle?
No, I don't think so.
All right. So why don't we go through and just, I just wanted to make sure that there's nothing that's overhanging that will lead users to a crappy experience right now with 1.6, right? And so I think the reset thing kind of meets the bar there. The dev RPM thing and the networking stuff, I think, meets the bar. Are there any things like stumbling blocks that we think will hit 161 users right now that we need to prioritize fixing? Anything else?
You said something about that at KubeCon. You said something that someone had access to kubelet logs from localhost. I couldn't reproduce that with 1.6.
Somebody did. So it was in the Slack channel. Somebody said that they were able to they were getting an error and they were able to get to the, I don't know if they were running mixed versions or something. I didn't have a chance to dig into it. So I think
so.
If they were able to do what they said that they were able to do in the Slack channel, then it would have meant that like RBAC was broken, right? And so like that's scary. My guess is that there was a configuration issue, but I think it's worth sort of doing a little bit of probing there to make sure that it's.
Yeah, I tried to reproduce, but at least my tries to get into the kubelet was all denied.
Okay.
Testing 1.6.1, but it could be worth for other people to check that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Even more carefully.
So the only other thing is that if you go through that sort of, tire fire of a bug that everybody was complaining about, there were a lot of folks that were seeing kubeadmin hang in a different place. And there were some suggestions that there were some issues around, requirements and Docker settings around, and when running on CentOS with RPMs. I don't understand the root of that issue. Is there action needed there? Does somebody really understand what's going on there?
Was this in the deadlock bug?
Yeah. If you look in the deadlock bug,
people were posting some stuff that was basically saying if you disable kubelet networking, things are fine. And while strictly speaking, that was true. I mean, it wouldn't be network not ready if there's no network to prepare. So that was fine. And then they were like, and everything works fine now, but they didn't really. I
think in between when we did our last release and now the Docker version that we are using with CentOS was changed in a way that uses a cgroup driver that is different. They switched from the cgroup FS driver to the systemd driver. And kubelet is still by default uses the cgroup driver. So kubelet and Docker do not interact together, and I don't think kubelet starts.
Yeah, that was different than what I was thinking.
Okay.
It was all in the same thread though. So.
Yeah, I think that's the main issue with CentOS. Do you have any? I mean, what can we do other than
this recommended that we change kubelet to use what Docker uses. And that does not require a Kubernetes release. That just requires us to cut a -1 of the RPMs.
Yeah, exactly. That makes sense. I think we should do it then. What the other thing?
Okay.
Okay, and so there's still people commenting on this bug, but
it's a different issue. There's a issue in release that's tracking it.
Yeah,
okay.
it's kind of a catch-all issue, that one.
Okay, so can we dig up that other issue in release and point people to it, or was it already there? Okay, I guess let's just let somebody, I'll keep an eye on this bug and sort of trying to redirect people to opening new issues or seeking help elsewhere. Okay.
Yeah, and there were people like that also said that, well, I can't access localhost 8080. What's wrong with my setup? So that's also a UX thing we have to take care of. But at least in this issue, I think users opt to use it. So at least that's fine with saying that you should run these 3 commands.
All right.
Secured.
All right, cool. So I put a note on that CentOS thing. I'll dig up the bug there. And I think hopefully that's it in terms of housekeeping for the 1.6 cycle.
Yeah,
if
so, I mean,
rises to the top, let me know.
Cool. I just wanted to take a step back for a second, and for the benefit of anyone on this call who doesn't have the context, could we just summarize what happened, what went wrong, and what the current status is, please?
Yeah, I'll do that real quick. So late in the cycle, we discovered that CNI and the way that kubeadmin was using it and the way that a lot of the CNI providers worked was broken. And so what would happen is that the CNI providers would error out when they were asked to delete a context for something that they were never called to create on. This was a change in behavior from 1.5. And so what that meant is that the kubedns pod would never actually come up, because what would happen is that you would bring up the cluster, you would schedule kubedns, it would make its way onto a node, but it wouldn't start because CNI wasn't configured yet. You'd configure CNI, and then in the process of trying to restart and actually bring up kubedns with CNI, it would get into a fail loop because the CNI driver said, I don't know how to delete that thing, okay? And we were in this position where we could either update all the CNI implementations, or we could actually change the behavior of the kubelet so that it was more forgiving of these errors here. The solution that we ended up with was to actually have the kubelets recognize when CNI is not installed and not try and start any pods to begin with. As a side effect of that, what that meant is that the kubelet now started reporting that it was not ready before CNI was available. Right? So before it would say it was ready, but CNI was broken, and we could sort of sneak some stuff in there and make stuff kind of work enough to actually fix things up. Now it was actually being more upfront about the fact that the node was kind of in a hork state because CNI was misconfigured, or was not configured. This stuff landed very late, and so as a result, we didn't have a lot of testing on the RC. So this was landed between the last alpha and the RC, and we didn't get a lot of test coverage on the RC, I think because most everybody was busy preparing for KubeCon.
Yeah.
And it was like over a weekend, right? So it just did not get a lot of eyes. So I think one of the things in the postmortem is fundamentally, I think we rushed the release of 1.6.0 because we didn't have enough bake time of the RC, because we wanted to be able to announce it at KubeCon. So what happened is, because the node was now marked not ready, what would happen is that kubeadmin would deadlock, right? Because it would get to the point where it would wait for nodes to actually join and mark themselves ready. That would never happen because CNI is not installed, right? And so that means that the kubelet would actually wait there forever. Now, if we went through and we actually made the kubelet say, you know what, I don't care if the node is ready or not, I just want to make sure that the node is actually there, that would get us to the point where we try to do a test deployment, and that test deployment wouldn't work because the scheduler wouldn't even schedule nodes to nodes that were marked as not ready. And so the fix that we ended up going in for 1.6.1 was to actually change kubeadmin not to wait for the nodes to be ready, for the master node to be ready, and not to do the test deployment because there's no reason to, because there's no other nodes that have joined. The nodes are not ready. When we remove those, we still have this end run where if you schedule a daemon sets with host networking turned on, it sort of bypasses the scheduler. It gets scheduled regardless of the fact that the node is not ready. It is good enough for you to get CNI installed and up and running so that you're off to the races, right? At some point, I wouldn't be surprised if the daemon set starts actually recognizing node not ready also. So we need to start testing this crap really well. A lot of the discussion that bug was about moving the not ready stuff to being taints that are more granular versus some sort of big enum saying that it's not ready. But that's going to be a larger thing to think about and talk about in the 1.7 timeframe. Does that summarize it for you, Luke?
That's a really helpful summary. That taught me a lot about what happened as well, so thank you.
And I think a lot of it is that, a lot of the stuff just landed hard. We didn't get enough testing on it as early as we should have. I think it was difficult to test kubeadmin early on, just because the process of building the release artifacts similar to the way that we're going to deliver them to users is very difficult in the middle of a release, right? There's no way for me to go through and build a private version of everything that users are going to install so that I can actually sort of test that along the way. So all the testing that had been done with kubeadmin up until this point was very sort of narrow, like let's cobble a bunch of stuff together. And I think as an implication of that, we didn't notice the ordering issues that were working us with respect to CNI as early as we probably could have. So, but this is all for the postmortem, but that's at least in my mind, that's the story of how this all kind of ended up in the toilet.
Yeah. And so for me, the big takeaway from what, as I understand it, is that more automated testing could have caught this. And actually block the release on getting this problem fixed. Is that a fair assessment?
That is a very fair assessment. I think the CNI change probably wouldn't have gone in if we had actually had sort of testing of this stuff early on in the first time. So we never would have gotten in that situation. And if we'd had release testing, we would have noticed the deadlock between the RC and the actual release.
I mean, to be fair, our testing did all break. It just wasn't considered release blocking. I think that was
exactly. That's
okay. My mistake then. So yeah,
our tests all went red at the point where the PR went in, but it wasn't.
Which PR? This was the CNI PR?
Yeah, but it wasn't being tracked as part of like release blocking tests.
Yeah, that's also, and since folks wanted to get 1.6, like the official one, out for KubeCon, it wasn't recognized as something to take into account.
And I think,
but it's a communication issue as well, I guess.
And I think at this point there is a mismatch in terms of the Kate's release cycle and how that works, and the recognition that so many users are using KubeAdmin at this point, whether they like it or not. So I don't think the KubeAdmin stuff was necessarily getting as much eyes at that level as it perhaps should have. I think some of this is evidenced by there was, usually we do the 1.6.1 like 2 weeks out, and there was a question of whether we wanted to do a hurry up and do a 1.6.1 to fix KubeAdmin, or whether we wanted to wait that 2 weeks. Based on the sort of reaction from the community and the amount of noise that we heard, it's pretty clear that it was important to get a release out ASAP, and that there's a lot of users out there. Makes sense.
So I just wanted to say thank you to everyone who reacted to it and put time into fixing it. I'll just say that. And the other question I have is, so Robert, you mentioned that the tests were in the wrong category. Has that been rectified now, or are they still in the wrong category?
Well, there's not really a category necessarily, right? Like I think the release owners were looking at a particular tab in TestGrid. And there are a zillion different tabs, right? And so we can put our tests into that tab, which hopefully brings it to their attention, which I think is what Jacob was just saying yes about. But there's a larger issue of trying to figure out which tests should be release blocking and how do we aggregate those results. And I think a single tab is maybe insufficient as the number of tests goes up.
Makes sense.
I just think there's so many tests, it's really hard to figure out what's running when and where and what matters and what should be broken and it's totally messy. Yeah.
Perhaps we can dig into this deeper once we have a postmortem written out, and we can do some offline commenting on the doc.
Yeah, definitely. I didn't mean to segue us into a complete postmortem here, I think, but I was about to ask whether what we've just discussed, starting from Joe's summary through to that discussion, sort of satisfied, Robert, your bullet point in the agenda for postmortem for 1.6.0.
Yeah, I guess I just wanted to bring this up to make note that Brian had asked for one, which I think is the right thing to do. In the same way that the SIG for storage wrote a postmortem after 1.3, although they called it a retrospective instead of a postmortem, which makes it really hard to find in history. And Jacob had volunteered to start working on this. I think Jacob's going to probably want lots of help from the community. And so if he reaches out to you, please help him. We want to get this out sooner rather than later to show that we're being very responsive in terms of how we're root causing and working on solutions going forward. So this is more of a call to action to write the postmortem rather than trying to say what should go in it, because I think we need to do that offline.
Yeah, sounds good. Oh, Joe, you're muted. I can see your lips moving.
I was going to say thank you, Jacob, for stepping up and helping to drive that.
Yes, thank you.
No worries.
Cool. So, Robert, you're next up as well with 1.7 planning.
Great. I don't know if Lucas has got one thing after this. This is likely to eat up maybe most of the next half hour. So if we want to quickly, Lucas, if your agenda item is quick, maybe we should do that first.
Yeah, it's not that. Well, basically we have about 20, maybe more, 25, 30 PRs pending for KubeAdmin for targeted ad master. So just a heads up that we should, the reviewers of the individual PRs should kindly take a look at those or reassign if they don't have time. And then we can probably as soon as possible get a stable version of on master. And now that we also have the testing available, we should have a quick link to that as well, so people can find it quickly. Is it any way that one could request that on the issue on a separate PR, Jacob? Do you know? I mean, can I run Kubernetes bot kubeadmin test this, and it will like run the test and link the success failure logs?
I believe so. I'll have to double check the trigger for that.
Yeah, cool. That would be super helpful when trying to get some. I mean, most of them are like 10, 20, 30 lines, so they are not that hard, but it's a lot of external contributors that have made these contributions, and they have already waited for like 3-4 weeks, so we should try to take a look at those as soon as possible, so it doesn't seem too bad from our perspective. I know from my own experience, it could be when folks are trying to ping the right people and nobody answers, it could be a little bit frustrating. So we should say that frustration if we just can. Well, no, nothing more special. Probably we could go on with the 1.7 planning.
Great.
For sure.
If people want to open up the doc I linked to, I'm just going to sort of walk down to the doc. These are in no particular order, so we're going to try to get all the way to the end somewhat quickly, so people can then kind of go back and think about what they want to work on or commit to, and or how we should prioritize as a group. So let's just dive in. So the first one is component configuration. This is something that came up at a SIG meeting maybe 3 or 4 weeks ago now, when Brian was on, and we were talking about how various components in the system, the kubelet, the scheduler, the API server, are all moving towards getting rid of command line flags and starting to put their configuration in etcd. This is somewhat related to add-on management, because the add-on manager also is going to need to deal with configuration of add-ons. And since lots of different SIGs were doing this, and we don't really have a great framework for cross-SIG efforts, it was sort of decided that the cluster lifecycle SIG would own this effort going forward. And from what I can tell, this is going to land in 1.7 in one or more places, right? So it's already in the scheduler, right? It's likely to end up in the API server or the controller manager soon. It's being actively worked on, and will probably soon land in the kubelet. And other components like the system DNS component and so forth, the cluster autoscaler, are likely to move this direction pretty soon. So Mike Denise from Google has from our side volunteered to drive this. I'm sure he'd be happy to have other people from outside of Google help drive this effort. But basically what we're looking for here, sorry, go ahead, Lucas, you have your hand up.
Yeah, just a quick question. Is this basically the ability to give the component a configuration file, or is this something that's going to be stored in the API?
The latter, right? So this is, I think the configuration file is an intermediate step, right? So that is one way to get your config, but ideally everything will be in etcd.
Cool.
In the limit.
Yeah.
So the goal here isn't to go and implement this for everybody else. The goal here is to drive consensus and a sort of a default pattern for how component config should be done. And from my point of view, I look at the exit criteria as having at least 2 or more components in the system having a consistent component configuration story, and us having some docs about how everyone else can add them without necessarily having to go through us. So it's going to require inviting people from the SIGs that are working on this. I know that the SIG apps folks were interested either to our SIG meetings or to sort of separate meetings to just work on this specific issue. So the second one I put in here was production ready kubeadmin. So I've heard from some of our product managers at Google that people in the community complain that kubeadmin is not creating sort of what they would consider a production ready cluster. And this means different things to different people. And so we need to sort of think about like how we can fix kubeadmin to make the clusters it produces more sort of production grade. So that sort of fits in with things below, like different phases, like upgrades and downgrades, like HA. Like I think those are things that people all consider to be production. But there's also things like taking the beta APIs that we added in 1.6 and making those GA APIs. If I put in here use kubeadmin and kubeup.sh, because I think that if we can start using kubeadmin and kubeup, it will vastly increase the amount of testing, right? Like we won't cut a release if kubeadmin is broken if every single test that runs on GCE is built on top of kubeadmin. So stuff like that where we're burning lots, we can get lots of miles on actually using it. And we can start sort of, I know, Justin commented elsewhere in the doc that they're starting to use it in COPS, right? So again, starting to use it in more production deployments and figure out sort of what that means. We're also this quarter going to start looking at how to use kubeadmin inside of GKE. I'm not sure we'll get there this quarter, but we're going to start trying to figure out what the gaps are, and that's also going to drive into trying to make it more production ready. So lots of sort of subtasks there that are kind of loosely grouped into this bucket, but those are all sort of independent tasks. The next one was taking kubeadmin and making sure we have a solid list of phases it's broken into. And Lucas has a doc where the phases are proposed, which hopefully we can link in here. And sort of to get some consensus around that. And I think this goes back to production ready, which is as we start to use this in more production deployments, we can make sure that the phases are correct and the phases actually satisfy the needs of the various production deployments. And to try to sort of nail those phases down, because at some point those phases do become an API that we need to maintain and needs to be backwards compatible across releases.
I also think that there's a huge opportunity to document those phases super well so that people understand what's going on, and that'll actually in turn make kubeadmin feel like less of a black box because people, oh, here's all the stuff that it's doing.
Right, and that's kind of what I mean by like it's an API, right? This is something that people are going to start coding to, and to code to it, they're going to want documentation so they understand what they're doing. I think Justin had mentioned that he's like just linking in the kubeadmin source code to get the parts he needs, which is not where we want to be, right? We want him to be able to shell out to it and just take the pieces he wants that way. And even if he ends up building in the code, like it should be possible for COPS to shell out. It should be possible for GKE to shell out. It should be possible for any other sort of production deployment to shell out to the parts of kubeadmin they care about.
Yeah.
Or at least render it and use a stable Golang API, right?
Yeah.
Like actually an explicit API rather than just calling a function that is in a file.
Yes.
Yeah. I think we got quite far in the 1.6 timeframe towards production readiness with all the security features, or whether they are features or not may be discussed, but at least it got improved a lot. And for example, in 1.6, an underdocumented thing is that you can bring your own CA cert and your own other cert. We haven't documented that anywhere. And I mean, some of these things I had time to like implement the two first phases, cert and kubeconfig, but it should be vastly expanded and a lot more documented. And I'll take a look. I'll revisit the kubeadmin phases doc soon and try to think about what I thought 1 month ago, something when I wrote it, and try to add some of the new experiences we've had and more things we've discussed. So it would be great.
I also think that we're probably not going to really be able to lock down the phases until we do have more production deployments actually using kubeadmin.
No, exactly.
So the sooner we can sort of move in that direction, the sooner we'll have confidence that the phases we've defined are actually correct.
Yeah, I think we should aim for, okay, it's all for now, but I think we should aim for a stable alpha that we consider beta, but still have alpha in, well, just in case something is really wrong when GC tries to use it and we have to redo a lot of things.
Yeah, and or COPS, right? Like it shouldn't just be about GC. It's any production deployment. Like those are the two that I can think of off the top of my head because we talk about them a lot. But there are likely other people using this in production. If we could get Box to use it for their production, if we could get folks that are running on other on-prem installations. It would be really useful to know what parts they need to break out to make it work with their automation.
Yeah, exactly. So I think we should aim for a beta-like API for this based on the proposal I have. And then, but still, well, we'll see when we get close to the milestone, the code freeze. But initially alpha, and then try to make all known cloud providers, all large deployments use it, at least in a testing branch or something, and then move to eventually to beta or GA in later this year. That sounds really good to me.
Excellent. All right, so next on the list is upgrades and downgrades for kubeadmin. So this is something that we'd sort of been a little bit punting on. Now that kubeadmin is beta, I think when 1.7 ships, people are going to expect to be able to upgrade their installations that they made 1.6. I know Luke has started working on a proposal for this. We also, we need people to think about how they can put some effort behind this to actually at least have a documented manual process for how to upgrade for 1.7, even if it has not been automated yet.
So what do you think about reusing at least something of the CoreOS work with this? I mean, what we discussed in the in-person meeting last week was that basically we would have kubeadmin upgrade shall create a deployment of some kind of a job that looks at a TPR that specifies these things, from what should I upgrade to what and so forth, to avoid building this this code into kubeadmin, because that would lead to a lot of compatibility issues. For example, kubeadmin 170 can't upgrade to 171, and all kinds of those issues. So
yeah, and also it would be more reusable if it's a controller rather than a kubeadmin specific piece of code.
Exactly. So that's the way to go here. But does CoreOS have something of this already? And then we also have to decide TPR API groups, decide fields in it, see if TPRs are going to break.
I believe that CoreOS have open sourced the Tectonic installer, which I believe does this thing. So I'm sure they would be happy for us to either be inspired by it or directly graft bits of code out of it.
Use it as a base.
So I think. Oh, go ahead, Aaron. I'm sorry.
I was just going to say the upgrade stuff isn't open source right now, just because it's pretty specific to just some environmental stuff that we do. But I mean, I can definitely talk about exactly how we do it, and we can kind of recreate that same process. I don't think it's anything particularly special or that complex.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
I was going to suggest, I think, it's probably worthwhile for us to be a little bit more formal about how we're doing some of this stuff. I think the discussion that we're having here is great, but I'd love for us to see us start doing a process where we get some sort of 1 or 2 page design docs where we can argue about this stuff and really dig into the details, and then use the time that we have here to do a review of those, right? Where it's a time for everybody to sort of start from, having read some of this stuff, a little bit of the pre-discussion, so that we can use this time to really talk about the specifics that have already been hashed out.
So for those who weren't in Berlin or who weren't at the SIG-cluster-lifecycle meetup in Berlin, we started doing that verbally to begin with, and I made copious notes on the different pieces. And those notes are already in the in-person Berlin notes. They're a bit stream of consciousness at the moment, but it's all there already. And I will make a commitment now to have a first draft ready by next Tuesday.
Yeah, I think in the same manner I brought up the phases thing, we should have a design doc for this. Maybe to Kubernetes kubeadmin, maybe to community. I don't know which one is better. I know Joe suggested some days ago, maybe it was last week, that the the QBadM interfaces should be a separate features issue so that it gets more eyes. And
I don't know if I did, but that sounds like a decent idea.
Yeah. But anyway, I think that's worthwhile. So then we have 3 QBadM related things. We have the simplified cluster creation. I don't know, that's nearly a year old now, which is beta. We have the bootstrap tokens, which are alpha now, but should be beta in 1.7, because that's one of the huge building blocks we're using. And then finally, we have the phases, which will be probably alpha in 1.7.
Yeah, so sorry, did you say that we should have, were you saying that we should have a feature for the upgrade?
Yeah, for the phases stuff. Yeah. So
okay, phases stuff, yeah.
Yeah,
I was just going to say, I also intend to write, I think a proposal feature pair probably makes sense for the upgrade stuff. What do people think? Like there should be a feature.
Yeah, for me, that sounds good.
Okay.
I think when in doubt, communicate more widely, and the features are really about communicating more widely about what's going on. I just don't want, folks to be surprised as stuff happens that, hey, I didn't know you were going down that path, right? So getting stuff written down and finding ways to, get it in front of people's eyes if they want it, I think seems like a good plan.
Yep, and I can only apologize for having meant to do this for like literally months and not having done it yet. But the discussion that we had in Berlin was super, super helpful for me getting the structure of it down, and I'll write some nice words around that this week.
Cool. I'm going to keep moving so we can get through the list and maybe have a couple minutes at the end. Next one quickly is to pull master images from GCR instead of sideloading them using whatever distribution related hackery we have out of the Kubernetes TarGZ release bundle. This is partly about release process, where we should, when we build releases, be building the official images and pushing them up to GCR and Docker Hub. So we can pull them. It doesn't mean everybody has to. I know Justin's looking at like offline builds, and you can definitely, I think that the problem with what we do today is you have to sideload. The nice thing if we actually push official builds is you can still sideload if you want to warm your Docker cache, but you can also just pull, which also will help improve the upgrade experience. I don't know that we don't have anybody necessarily assigned to working on that yet, but it's something that would be nice to maybe try to convince people who are doing release velocity improvements to look at. Go ahead.
Yeah, would it like be a daemon set or something? How would you actually pull the image? Would it be?
Well, right now, if you look at the salt or the cost configuration shell scripts, what they do is they sideload a Docker image with a hash. That Docker image is a tarball that's inside the Kubernetes TarGZ, and then they basically Docker run that hash, which is really terrible, right? Yeah. Like we have a release version; it should be pointing at the release version.
I think kubadmin does use the GCR versions, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
This has repercussions beyond kubeup because we cannot use CI builds for the kube API server and other components that we run in containers for kubadmin builds because we don't push them because we don't need to push them. So,
right. So being able to create your own sort of personal versions or have different names and repos. So just being more upfront about all this crap. Yeah. Okay.
Well, so what it would mean for kubadmin is we could test kubadmin against master kube API server, which we cannot do today. Because we don't put those as part of our CI process because we don't require that.
All right. I think I don't understand all the requirements here. I mean, I think it's probably worth to, is this part of the release process and the release, or is it threaded throughout everything else?
It's both. So in order to do this in our kubeup CI test, we need to make it part of the CI build to push Docker images. Since we don't have it as part of the CI build today, we cannot use test kubadmin against master.
Oh, I see. Okay, so what we want is you do a CI build, it pushes images, and then part of the testing pulls those images back down.
Right, we don't have that today.
Okay. Yeah, cool. And a side effect of that would mean that I could then go ahead and create and push images and do the same thing on my own machine if I wanted to, which would be sweet.
Right.
Okay, very cool.
All right, so next is add-on management. So this is something that we've talked about many times. Justin has volunteered to drive this in the 1.6 timeframe. It doesn't look like he's here today, but he did say he will try to prioritize this for the next release cycle. I don't know if he's committing to getting this finished. I know Brian has sort of a straw man doc of what he would like this to look like. And that's a great starting point. I don't know that we should necessarily be forced to follow that to the letter. I think we need to look at the requirements and make sure we're building the right thing. But the end goal here is really, we want to have add-on management that's consistent across all Kubernetes installations, and not where it only works if you run this weird hacky shell script that's installed by Salt. It should make Kubernetes more portable. It should make kubeadmin installations sort of more both sort of similar and also powerful across the board.
That's cool.
Yeah. So next is HA clusters from kubeadmin. So one of this is sort of related to the productionization above, because especially people on bare metal would love to run HA Kubernetes, and we would like for them to be able to use kubeadmin to create their HA clusters.
Yeah, we talked about that in Berlin as well, and the agreement in Berlin was that we needed to do enough design for HA to ensure that we weren't going to go in the wrong direction when we did self-hosted upgrades. So the goal for the design doc for the proposal is to include enough design on HA that people can get comfortable with that working. But a non-goal for 1.7 is to actually have fully implemented HA. That's probably not realistic. Although design will be much easier.
Yeah, and I think that almost everyone would agree that upgrades is more important than HA. It's more important to nail upgrades than to get partway through both, right? And I think it's also good to be explicit about what we're not going to deliver, because we don't want to be telling people, hey, we're working on HA, and then they expect it in the next release because we're working on it. If we can say explicitly, like, we're not trying to get there for 1.7, we're trying to lay the groundwork so we can get there past 1.7. That's a good thing to communicate too.
Yeah. In my mind, I think there's some really sticky issues around HA and bootstrapping with respect to certificates, right, and private keys.
Exactly.
I feel like we don't have an answer there. And that's going to be really tricky.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, we can party on the doc.
Yeah. On a high level, we said that we have two options for HA on like bare metal, and one is the smart client, which tries to refresh what CA certs do I trust and what API servers are there, and somehow catch it locally. But this puts burden on the client. The other possible option would be to use DNS of some kind. For example, we've talked about Weave DNS or a similar solution, something. Justin said he's working on something with Weave Mesh, Weave DNS, I don't know, that writes resolve conf and some, I don't know what he's doing, but basically we, at least as far as I know, have those two options and have to choose which one we're going with. Well,
yeah, I think that, let's move on from this topic because we want to get to the end of the list by the end of the meeting. Otherwise, I would comment on that because I have opinions, but let's move on.
It's probably not worth spending too much time on HA if we've decided it's a non-goal for 1.7. So next one is QProxy as a daemon set. Some folks have been moving FluentD to run as a daemon set instead of as static pods on various installations. We should do the same thing with QProxy. This is just sort of on the radar because it's somewhat related to deployment, but I really think this is a networking SIGs problem to solve. Although it again should help sort of make deployments more consistent. And as we have an add-on manager, and the add-on manager can say you need to run QProxy, the tricky thing with QProxy is that QProxy could be a bootstrapping problem, right? Because it's needed for services. So that's why it's on the list.
If I'm not mistaken, kubeadmin uses a daemon set for.
We've done it for since 1.4, but the kind of problem we face is currently we store the master API address, or basically the kubeconfig file in a ConfigMap, and well, there we have a problem if we want to update the master endpoint somehow. We have calling upgrades with daemon sets, but it's kind of hard, and probably it's going to affect the services in cluster and everything. So we haven't really thought about a non-disruptive way to update things here. But
okay. So maybe this is more just of a GCE QUp issue than it is a QBadmin issue. And as we rectify QUp to start using QBadmin, we will pick up some of these things on our way.
Yeah.
Excellent. The next one, this was something on my list that I had from last planning cycle, which was a cluster-wide config, but I couldn't remember what that meant. M. Toffen said that he thought it was storing stuff in like a global config map. If anybody has a recollection of what that is, otherwise I'm going to take it off the list and we'll not talk about it.
Was this like feature flags that cut across multiple components, that type of thing?
I don't know.
Even more than feature flags, it's like that. I can link the issue. It's one of Tim's Hawkins issues.
Is it an issue, Mike, that you think is a cluster lifecycle issue, or is this not necessarily our problem as well?
I think it's pretty closely related to the rest of the configuration effort. So
maybe we can try to lump it into the component config stuff.
Yeah, I think it's pretty similar to component config, but I don't either remember exactly what it is. Yeah, and the cloud provider thing. Yeah, I think it should work on GCE. That's on my list to test it on GCE. It's shipped with 1.6, so it just should work. Like on the controller manager side, we didn't touch the kubelet, so obviously that's we still have to enable the kubelet cloud provider flag, but
yeah, this is mostly on the list because we need to be abreast of what's going on. Not that I think we're going to be doing a lot of work on it.
Yeah,
in the release.
But that's on my radar at least.
Excellent. I'm glad you're tracking that. Next is removing docs for unsupported distros. So this is overall we need to do a lot of docs writing and cleanup. And I think we often ignore the cleanup part, but there's a lot of sort of ancient docs about how to create clusters on 18 different platforms and so forth. We talked about sort of going through and trying to audit, which ones are broken, which ones don't have an upgrade story, either make that clear or start ripping them out. And I think we should, maybe try to keep working on that this quarter, try to make more progress.
I maintained, Brendan Burns initially made like a multi-node guide, like in Kubernetes early days, like 1.0. And I worked on that until 1.3. And then obviously moved on to KubeADM because Go code is preferable over Bash. So, but I'm gonna test if that's broken. I think it is for 1.6, since I haven't seen really anyone stepping up on maintaining that after me on 1.3. So I expect I'm gonna just send something to Kubernetes announce that, this will be removed in time for 1.7 because it's already broken in 1.6, so you can't use it.
Right. Yeah, and it'd be great if the owners of the other ones would do the same thing, but I'm not sure we can trust them to do that. So, and I don't have a way to test a lot of them. So I think it's just going to be sort of like send a PR to the owner trying to remove it and see if they push back.
Right. Cool.
And then the last thing on the list is something that Jacob added, which is to invest in velocity and pay down some technical debt, which are both important things for us to do to keep the wheels turning smoothly. We'd like to move QBadmin to its own repository. We've talked about that multiple times. Jacob has started writing sort of a proposal of how to do that. The only thing that I'm concerned about is we don't want to be the first one to move out. So there's lots of larger issues that aren't really our problem to solve with being the first thing to move out. So we saw with 1.6.0 release in the PostMortem that we weren't being tracked as a release blocking test. All of our issues are likely to start getting ignored from the release point of view. Our tests are start getting ignored as if we move out first. Kube Control is supposed to move out. I think they can take a lot of these arrows for us, and we can be sort of ready to move and not have any technical blockers to jump on the boat right after they're done.
Yeah, I'm glad to hear you say that, Robert, because that's why I pushed for QBadmin to be in the main repo, even though it's kind of a pain in the ass from the get-go, is that, we need to be able to sort of be front of mind. So yeah, let's be all the penguins pushing Kube Control off the ice floe first.
Right. Yeah. No. But I think if as long as we are ready to move, like once that's done, it shouldn't be too difficult to move. And I think Jacob's starting to look at the logistics of what that would take.
Yeah, I already did some work on this 3-4 months ago, maybe, and it wasn't that well. It required some manual bash scripting and other hackiness, but
yeah, I think the technical parts I don't think are hard. I think it's the logistics with the bigger project and the multiple repos it's hard.
And the release thing then.
Yes.
Is there a SIG release, by the way?
That's a good question. I don't know. Let's see.
I mean, there's SIG testing, but I mean, who actually owns the release, except for the release team for one particular release?
Yeah, I think it's the release branch owner, right?
Yeah, but
there is not a release SIG according to the wiki. I mean, the markdown file in the community repo, which is what I just looked at.
Okay. At least those are who I would expect to own this kind of stuff, but
do we know what who the 1.7 release team will be yet?
I don't think it's been announced, no.
Okay.
Yeah, I want to spend some time personally trying to get the release stuff up and running so that everybody can run it and we can spread some of that load and it can actually be part of our sort of day-to-day testing process when you really want to test things like they're going to be when we release. So I think that'll be good.
Yeah. Also, at least I'm not sure if I should write it here, but I envision a phase or QBadium validate or something. I know we talked about this in Seattle. Like basically a single QBadium command that would deploy an Nginx deployment and just curl for it or somehow test that DNS is working, test that QProxy is working, and some really basic smoke tests that we can say, well, user one, run this command, and then we know that at least 50% of your cluster is up and running for sure.
Yeah, I think there's a ton of need for being able to figure out what's going on with clusters configurations and validating conformance. But yeah, I think starting to move down that road would be great.
Okay, so we're almost out of time. Thank you everyone for a very productive meeting, and I will see you all next week, and I will publish this video online.
Thanks, Luke.
And I'll write that proposal. Cheers. All right,
we'll be looking for it. Thanks.
Cheers, bye.
Cool. Bye.